for me, KI simplifies things in this way, that healing and awakening end up being the same thing. If you take awakening all the way to embodiment, it's healing. If you take healing all the way, you recognize your true nature as awareness. I love that. It simplifies things and it bridges kind of the east and west in a certain way. But more than anything else, it just is the answer for so many of us. Because I've seen two camps show up, right? There are people who seek they're just seeking awakening or enlightenment. They want to wake up. They want to know their true nature, their true self, whatever that is for them, or whatever they think it is. Well, true nature, true self is pointing to awareness, presence. And then that's all they're looking for. Maybe. But nobody falls into like camps like this. It's just a way of pointing to different people's experience. And then there's another camp, again, just a pointer, because people are not generalities. Is that some people really are kind of either done with seeking and now they just want to heal. Like there's certain things that they just need to take care of now. Maybe they already did a lot of seeking. Maybe they already, I don't know, maybe they've already discovered awareness, but they're just focused on healing. Whatever they think is wrong that needs healing. Physical, mental health, addiction, whatever, chronic pain. So through the years, I think, like, who am I talking to here? Really, I think in the beginning when I came out with books about awakening, I think I was talking to this camp mostly of the seekers. And I was bypassing because I was avoiding anger. I had anger repression. So I would have fallen into that camp more easily too. I don't want to go into the healing camp because you guys are talking about like a trauma and stuff, or I might have to deal with my trauma. I don't think I want to do that. That's how I thought in a way, but it was all unconscious. I think I just wanted to skip all that, the processing stuff, that stuff, and get to the part where I get to see that I'm everything and nothing, and then I don't suffer. So I was in the seeker camp, but as I woke up and just sat in that as that for a number of years, I started to look over here and started to meet more people in the healing processing camp. And lo and behold, I was getting sick with diseases too. So then I moved all the way over into this camp for a while, into mental health and addiction treatment centers, right? Was involved with 3 of those at one time. Owning or operating or being the chief, like, operating officer. Then I was fully in that camp, but really to help other people. And I was bringing the awakening piece to the healing and behavioral health world, the mental health addiction world. So I was already bridging them, but I hadn't really bridged them in myself fully. I was just trying to bring the recognition of awareness more and more to the behavioral health and mental health field. But in the end, it's just been totally different. It's like what I see now is that each camp is really, it's all the same thing. And so I'll just try to, here's how it is for me. I don't think you can heal trauma and repression, make that conscious, and actually fully allow everything, even the buried emotions, from an ego. Because the ego is created from the trauma. You have to hold back what's true. That's the repression. Then you're forced to identify with what's false. That's the ego. The ego is there because of the repression. So the ego, that person, can't heal the trauma. But if you make the recognition of what you are important from the beginning of your healing path, that's what I want to say to the people in the healing camp. If you'll make the recognition of awareness important, but not everything, because your processing is good. You know, processing is good. Just make sure that you're processing in a way that's making things conscious. You're not just using processes or inquiries or therapy to get somewhere, because there's the ego seeking mind, and that's an endless loop. So if you ground yourself in awareness, this is to the healing camp, ground yourself in awareness from the beginning. This is the inside out path, by the way. And then process with the right skills. You're in the right place. That's beautiful, because then you've married the two. The awakening, the awareness, and the processing is married. And if you add KI in there, it gets to the root of suffering. You're, in my view, you're on a really good track there. But then as I come back to the seekers, which I can relate to, because I was in 12-step and therapy, but I was seeking. And so I can recognize that need to like fucking stop processing every goddamn thing. And let's just recognize what we are. But what I want to say to that camp is there's a reason for that seeking. That's not coming out of nowhere. That is a trauma response coming from the repression. I don't want to feel stuff, the buried stuff, creates that seeking. So that seeking is important because it's pointing us back to what we are. But if we just follow the seeking, it's an avoidance pattern, see? If we just seek, then we're avoiding what's in the body. But if we see the seeking mind and we pull it back and we do inquiry that takes us to the repression behind the seeking, now we're in business. And those folks who are seeking awareness can then recognize awareness without avoiding the emotions. And that corrects the bypass. That's what we want there. That's good. So now we bring them together. And that's just really the inside-out path. See, it's not really two camps. We're just saying, okay, we've created this path now. And this path already includes it all. Because I know from my experience, and I think I want to share about your experience, but it's really your experience, so you have to share about it. I know about my experience that the recognition of presence and the embodiment led to healing. And those things do not feel like separate things. And I mean healing not just of the physical pain, the spinal stenosis, but relational issues and an inability to express certain emotions and the issues that come from that, healing in that too. So, you see how that simplifies it? For me, it simplifies it all. And it simplifies some other things too. Like, you see the word no self, or the phrase no self used over here in the seeker spiritual thing. No self. I get that. Yeah. But there's nobody to get that. But I get that. But there's nobody to get it. And that's just it. There's nobody here. And if you really do the investigation, you see, well, you don't want to say there's nobody here. It's just that you can't find any self here. There's no findable entity here if you look. There's no self. There's phenomena, there's programming, there's emotions, there's thoughts. There's no self. And at the basis of experience, there's just awareness or presence. But then how does that apply to over here, this crowd, when they're talking about like Gabor Mate, Dr. Gabor Mate, when he says to heal from disease, you have to be your authentic self. And then why do some people over here in the seeker crowd talk about true self? And see how it starts to get confusing. True self, authentic self, no self. Well, here's how I see that. The true self word is pointing to awareness. That's awareness. That's presence. True self. There is the self that you thought that you were. The story, the body and mind is not what you are. That's the programming that you were identified with. You're ultimately the awakeness to which it appears. And to embody that is to be the authentic self. But that's not an entity. That's not a separate entity. The authentic self isn't. It's the recognition of presence at the basis of your experience and the allowing of everything, including the buried stuff. That's what makes it authentic. Because by having buried stuff, you're forced to identify with what's false. So you're not coming into a new form of ego when you discover authentic self. That cannot be what Gabor Mate means. That doesn't align with my experience, and I don't think he would either say that. The ego itself is a trauma response. So an authentic self, a mind that really thought that it was being an authentic self would probably be doing that to stay safe. Right? Because really authenticity and is like presence. It's only can be known through experience directly. You can't know it through the mind. You can know suffering. Right? You see suffering. You can see inauthenticity is suffering. But there's the mind self. But with the lack of that being identified with, then what you are is not that. You're not that entity that you thought you were, that story. You're this presence here that's boundless and vast and has no beginning or end. But also there's an authenticity in here because you still have an individual expression as you. That, to me, has to be included. Otherwise, we get sick. I mean, well, that's the worst case, maybe. Or we die from trauma that's unprocessed. That's probably the worst case. But in my view, we're just going to keep suffering if we don't Well, just like Gabor Mate said, we have to. What I really hear him saying is we have to embody presence. And all that only seems like a really big deal to the ego that fights it, because presence is really our true nature. It's like the way I feel about presence is like I should have been pointed to this when I was a kid. If I lived on a planet with conscious beings, my parents would have just shown me this, or I would have known that I am this presence. This presence is at the basis of my experience. It's kind of got ripped off. That's how I see it. So to really make a huge deal out of it as an adult, I think that comes from safety. I think that when we write all these books and we do all these pointers just about the awareness, it's like we're overemphasizing it. It feels like it needs to be part of an overall development of humans where we just recognize that presence is at the basis, and then we deal with our stuff, like we still have to be, informed human, and we have emotions and thoughts and relationships, and that has to be included in this. And that just makes perfect sense to me. But when you're in repression, it might resonate, but it can feel scary. That's what your conditioning is supposed to do, though, is scare you into not, right? Into not joining the people in the processing crowd and going over here. But everybody's trying to stay safe, though. Like if you find yourself in some camp in which you're only processing and you don't want to know the awareness piece, or you only want to know the awareness piece, you're not processing, I'm saying that's being driven by safety. I can almost assure you, if you're finding yourself in one camp or the other, there's repression there. Which means emotionally trying to stay safe, get love. Where would that be? How would that be? Well, if you were only processing and you weren't seeing the presence as the basis of your experience, then it's like you're buying into the time game and the deficiency game. I'm not there yet, which reinforces the sense of deficiency, which is coming from the repression. Grounding yourself as awareness helps you to see that cycle where you're trying to get somewhere and to see that you're really the presence to which it's all happening. That settles you in your true being. So that you're not seeking your true being, seeking what you are in the future. You are this. So there's safety. See that? Trying to stay safe. And by the way, as you continue to identify with things, you get love. So by just processing stuff and trying to be a better person, you get to stay safe and get love from other humans. Well, that's driven by the repression. That's the trauma. Because our relationships don't need to be about that at this stage in evolution. We don't need to be, when we're ready to change now, we don't have to relate to each other. Just stay safe, get love. There can be more authenticity here if and when we're open to do that work. But anyway, safety. See that? Processing only, often driven by repression. Trying to stay safe, get love. It's not a judgment. It's a fact. Take a look at it. If you're triggered, process it. Seekers, staying safe. If that's all you're doing. Because where does that come from? It comes from, I don't want to feel something. That's why I'm seeking in time. My mind is in resistance to feeling something. So I'm in a story of a person who's going somewhere, and that keeps me safe from the buried stuff. Bring in processing, seekers. Bring it in. And keep doing your awareness practices, just like I'm saying to this crowd. Definitely make awareness the prime focus of recognizing that. Bring in the processing. Make sure it's skillful. Make sure it gets to the root, because the repression, the root, is driving the seeking. See how it all comes together here if you look. But, okay. I don't know. I'm just talking. I don't know if this resonates. To me, it does. I think what it is because the direct experience is the direct experience. And when I look at all these concepts, I'm like, well, I know that there's embodiment here, so these concepts have to be pointing to something. Otherwise, they all feel like they're conflicting or something. They don't make sense experientially. And if concepts don't make sense experientially, I don't want to use them at all. But these actually do make sense to me in some way. Like even the oneness, the non-dual thing, and the non-dual versus the duality, there's no conflict there. I don't feel any conflict between the sense that there's no separation and the conventional reality that we set boundaries or have names and all that. And I think that also reduces suffering when you don't make a big split out of the idea that it's all one, or that there's separation, or not separation, but dualistic, conventional reality. When you don't have a problem with any of that, and you're settled in your being around all that, it's just, you just look back and you realize most people are just arguing about that because they just want to stay safe. They're just arguing about concepts because they don't want to go into their bodies. And I know that. I don't even judge it because I get it. I was an anger repressor. And anger repressors can really talk shit to avoid anger. I mean, when I say talk shit, I mean debate. And I mean, resist the hell out of being angry in that debate. And just not be real, because we're angry. We buried it. Anyway, back to the bridging of the two camps. Do you feel that? Bring that all together. I wish you guys would gauge with me a little bit more. Is there anything there that doesn't make sense for you? Or it's certainly not about concepts. So if we sit and think about it, it could just be, it could be really hard to even understand. But if you have the direct experience of there's presence here, and that's all that's really here ultimately, it's just presence, and it has different forms to it, of course. It's all millions and trillions of different forms to it. Feeling, thought, color, shape, sound, on and on and on and on. Frequency, vibrancy, vibration. Everything down to the noise of the nervous system and the quietness. Everything is included in that. But if there's presence at the basis of all of it, if that's your experience, then you can't not say that that's what you are. If you don't recognize that presence at the basis of all of it, the mind can, of course, deny that and say whatever it wants to say about who you are. But once you directly experience it, and what I was trying to say is that all the phenomena, the endless phenomena, appear to it. So once you really recognize that, well, that's your true self. That's your, what we say, or you can say there's no self at the basis of that. That's the way that you spin that, I guess, is different. It has to be experienced, I think, to really feel into what I'm saying. And then if that is your experience, imagine it for a second. If that is your experience, then there's some contraction in your body. See, you wake up to your true nature awareness. And now, because there's awareness here, you can feel your body more. And then you notice, oh, there's something there. That's where the processing comes in, because that stuff is hidden. And in the body is the repression. And now that you've recognized awareness, see, you can investigate that through processing with the right skills, and then you're going to get to the root of the suffering there. And that's where the two become one, or the awareness and the processing, the awareness and the healing become one when you have skillful tools, because if you have unskillful tools, you'll be processing to try to get somewhere. Right? But if you have skillful tools like KI, you're making the unconscious conscious. You're making the mechanism that's trying to get you to go somewhere conscious, which helps you embody the presence, because that mechanism is the repression. So these are good tools, right, to bring into the awareness recognition from the beginning of the path, because they're helping you make conscious the very basis of these identities, trauma responses, seeking, the incessant processing to get somewhere. All that is coming from this buried stuff. See how the inside out and why it got created, inside out path. If you really hear this, you can see that I would never, ever want to come out with a non-dual path that just talks about awareness in a way that would avoid all this. Nor would I want to come out with a set of tools. It's just about processing to get somewhere, reinforcing ego. Now I've seen how both of these things work. I want to put these two things together, the awareness and the processing, in a way that makes sense, that actually leads to embodiment and healing. And of course, awakening, that's part of it too, along the way. You can't not recognize presence as the basis of your experience if you go all the way with the repression work, because there's your programming that creates the false identities down in the buried emotions. You can't not wake up to presence by doing 3D KI. You might get stopped along the way by big contractions or emotions that you don't want to feel, but that's just getting stopped along the way. You raise your skill level, you move through that. By moving through that, that helps in the recognition. You more deeply embody it. You're more settled in your being because you went through it. You learn. You gain confidence by going through it. You continue to raise your skill. So people have an issue with skill. I lost when I did a video on here's high skill in KI, and I lost 100 followers on YouTube. That's okay, because this is what it takes, and those people shouldn't have been here. Because that whole thing where it's like, why should I have skill? Well, because we're unconscious, because we have buried emotions, because resting as awareness, that programming that buries those doesn't come to awareness. It's a simple fact. So you can turn your head, you can bury your head all you want and say you don't need skill, but you're going to suffer if you're on an awareness path because the body keeps a score. And so you would fit into the seeker crowd, right? So some people would say, I don't want skills because that's an ego. And I don't want to try to get somewhere. I want to recognize presence. But see, you're just in that camp, and then that you're trying to stay safe. See that? I get it, totally. But he doth protest too much, is what I would say. If you protest in some way, it's like the harder you hold down in some position, the more it's coming from repression. That's why I can't defend KI ultimately. Because if I were to do that, it would be coming from the unprocessed. All I can do is point to the unprocessed and say, here are the tools. It's all I can do. And keep pointing to it. I don't think I can do much more than that. Talk about it in a bunch of different ways, but I don't know. Is there anything else I want to say to you if you're in the seeker crowd, or if you are in the processing crowd, or if you're in that crowd that says, don't fucking label me, Scott. I'll put you in this crowd over here. Is there anything else I want to say to these three crowds here? Well, I'm sorry for labeling you in a way that was offensive. But you define your own reality. And if I can say something that's that offensive to you, do you know yourself? Say that. If somebody can put a label on you that easily and you wear it that easily, maybe you have unprocessed. And that you're not as free as you'd like to be. So KI is right here for you. Because I've been called every name in the book at this point. With people coming out of anger repression. By the way, just real quick, let me say, I think part of my job is just to kind of be the father figure that people just get mad at times. And then work out their anger with. I think I'm totally fine with that as long as you just don't put it on me a ton. Because if people just start emailing with all their anger, I'll be like setting boundaries all over the place. And we don't connect that way. So yeah, you get angry, of course. I'm dad in an inquiry session, for example. Scott, I even heard someone say, Scott says we should process our stuff. Like, you don't have to do that if you don't want. You don't have to follow me. But if you do want to do it, you see how we'll become defiant against even processing our stuff, and we'll get even resistant to KI, and we might not even realize it's coming because we're angry at dad, or angry or hurt with mom and dad. We just don't see it yet. And so here I'm to point it out to you. And of course, if I'm the one pointing it out to you, why wouldn't you get upset with me? That's all natural. Use me. Get mad at me and process, but process it because you might want to stay connected to me during the process of trying to help you come out of repression. Anyway, is there anything else I want to say to the two camps? This is a new way. I know that. And before you were just given sort of it's not true. The diamond approach and certain non-dual teachings are kind of very healing oriented, right? So there's definitely teachings and practices out there. But none of them have brought deep somatic trauma and repression work that makes the unconscious conscious, repression conscious, to, in my view, an awareness-based context. I don't think it's actually happened. If it's there, that's fine. But I just don't think it's very common if it has happened. So I do think that there's a unique possibility here for people. I just want to say this before I go. A very unique, opportunity, I should say. Which is, you can start to put all the confusion aside. If you start picking up these tools, the confusion starts to clear up as you see that your suffering's coming from the repression. And you don't have to call it ego anymore or say my suffering's coming from separation to the seeker crowd. You don't have to say that anymore because it's actually coming from programming in your body that says you can't be yourself. You can't feel and express certain emotions, so you have to identify with the ego. And that's what I want to say to the seeker crowd. Go in your body and discover the root of all this from the beginning. And you'll have clarity and insight as to why you're seeking, what this is all about. And by making that conscious, you can start to make those buried emotions conscious, and then the seeking will just go away, because once you start to meet your experience, the seeking mind doesn't have to do that anymore. If you don't meet your experience, though, it tends to keep doing that. Meet your experience meaning go to the repression, because the repression is driving that. And the opportunity that the people that are trying to heal have is for real healing. I mean, the seekers have this opportunity here to awaken, truly to awaken and embody that. That's your opportunity, is to really make this an authentic awakening from the beginning by getting to the root and not trying to run away from the root. That's what I want to say to the seeker crowd. Don't run away from the source of suffering, because that's the bypass. And then to the healer crowd, if you fall in that category, don't shun the non-dual. Don't shun. I know that there's some crazy, stupid shit. I totally get that. And at times you may have thought that I was crazy, stupid shit. Teachers and such. And just stuff. Like crazy shit. I get it. But what I've had to do is to put my criticism of the teachers and the teachings, if that's your resistance, aside, and recognize that the state of consciousness of non-dual is a birthright, and that we all have that right to discover that, regardless of whether humans have fucked it up before. It's unfortunate that humans can fuck that up, but they can't. But don't poo-poo, if that's your objection, on spirituality or on waking up, because there's some bad apples out there. Because then you deny yourself. You deny yourself. Your issue with authority, too, both camps, I have to say this. Be careful with that. Because you're in repression and trauma. Do you see? And when you have anger repression, for example, you have to be against any outside authority, because you're against your own authority. You can't be. That's why you're in repression. And so if you make the authority that can help you, anybody that can help you, the enemy from the beginning, you can't even get the help that you need. So then you're on your own. That's fine. You're on your own. But why did you come here? So if you come here or anywhere and you fight the authority, take a look at that. You shouldn't give in to authority. You should question everything. But most of all, question the fact that that you're fighting authority, because that's coming from the trauma. There's a way to not fight authority, but to question them. In other words, you question them and you process all your emotions. By fighting authority, you don't process the anger. See that? Or you don't process the hurt. You're going to trigger, is what it is. Really processing as you move through that stuff. I definitely want to say that. But to the healing crowd, just my last words on that is, don't, for whatever your objection is to the presence, work with that resistance to Eastern practice, if you have it, or whatever it might be, or maybe you just don't know about it. If you don't understand or know about non-dual realization, go learn about it. Find the teachers that resonate. You don't have to get lost in all the non-dual language. Just have that as part of your context, those practices that help you recognize the presence. Bring those into your life as part of your healing process, and take an inventory of your processes to make sure your processes are not just strengthening the sense of a person who lives in time that's getting better or that's healing, because that is a trauma response and that's keeping you safe. although you may feel effects of your processing over time, as long as you stay in a story of trying to get somewhere, it's endless. It is so endless because it's coming from deficiency, and deficiency comes from repression. And until you heal the repression, that's going to keep happening. Endless processing. So check your tools to make sure your tools are making conscious the drivers behind all of that, the repression and trauma. The last thing I want to say to anybody is you can simplify all of this by just starting the KI path. So what I've done on YouTube, if I've put out videos that, for example, I got a video called How to Get Started on the Inside Out Path. Perfect place to start. Watch that because it has somatic testing in it, and it helps you discover what your repression is. And then from there, it gives you directions about which videos to go to. And if you stay and kind of watch videos chronologically after that, or I should say, watch the How to Get Started video and then come to the members area. We have everything there, including the skills. If you don't come there, at least arm yourself with context here on my YouTube channel by going back to the video called KI Map in December 2022, and then watching videos since then. Maybe not all of them, but at least the ones that talk about repression or inside out path. And then you catch up on the context. That's a really big part of this work. Is understanding, just like I've laid out here, what are we even doing here? We have to know what we're doing on a path. One more thing before I go. This whole thing of not knowing, let's talk about this, because we use that to stay safe. When we just hang out, especially in dissociated presence or presence, there is a not knowing. Presence is not knowing. Being, you don't know anything. The emptiness, there's a not knowing. But we use that sometimes to stay safe and to not really understand what we're doing here. And we can stay really safe that way because we can say, well, the camp over here, the seekers can say, well, you guys are processing too much. You need to not know to rest in the presence of not knowing. But see, you guys need to process more. You're using the not knowing to stay safe. You're tuning out of your body in some cases, right? So understanding what we're doing on the healing and awakening path, to me is so important. From the beginning. If you don't, what you'll do is you'll just pick up practices or inquiries left and right just to sort of try things out and be curious. That's totally fine to start, but your nervous system's running that. Your unconscious conditioning of stay safe, get love is running that random, trying different things. And let's just, be with this, be with that, try this, try that. That's being run by the unconscious nervous system. So almost definitely you're just staying safe. That's what I learned. That's why it took me 15 years to develop this path, so that when you get on it, you're not just trying to stay safe and bypass and avoid. But if you don't follow the path, if you don't understand the context, if you don't learn the skills, really none of what I'm saying will really resonate. Thanks.